Okay, welcome to the September 2nd, Thursday, Southborough Historical Commission. I call this meeting to order at 6:05. We are doing a remote meeting and we've been informed by our new town council that we do not have to read the long spiel in front of the agenda notice. So we can move right on to the first item, which is approved minutes from previous meetings. Now this is, as I remember, is simply the revised minutes for the June meeting. Is that what we're approving?
Or is it the ones that Dave sent out the other day?
Right, we could do both, I think, if
I haven't had a chance to look at those, and so I'd like to not do both. The one from the public hearing with MHC. I'm sorry I missed that I've had combobulations here with the thing. So what I'd like to do, and I would probably do these separately anyway, is approve the minutes from the June, whatever date that is, the ones that went out for revisions.
yeah, June 19th.
June 19th.
All right, so I move to accept the minutes for June 19th as revised.
Do I hear a second? That's Rebecca Deansbrough that says second. Who's sprouting a new hairdo too, and a little lighter color. Ooh,
Looks very nice.
very summery. All right, having heard the motion and a second, I will call a vote. Annie
Yes.
Wyson, yes. Kevin Miller,
Yes.
Rebecca Deansbrough,
Yes.
Jim Blaschke.
Yes.
Okay, so there we all are on the second day of September, which is my mother's birthday, by the way. She turned 95 today.
Whoa.
Yep. Okay, so I'm now going to open the public meeting for the demolition permit on 22 Edge Hill Road. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this permit? Is anyone raising their hand? Oh, I see. We have a guest here is raising their hand. Hello, guest. Oops. Hello, guest.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Yes.
My name's
Hello.
John Kiley. I submitted the request to demolish the house so
Okay.
I can rebuild it.
Hello, John. Welcome to our meeting.
Hi.
Okay, so we have had a chance to look over this. The question before us is whether or not this building should be preferentially preserved. I'd like to open the discussion. Mr. Kiley, we read your excellent proposal, by the way. We thank you so much for putting this together, a format that actually followed the regulations for once.
Okay, thank you.
It was really superbly well done and helped us to understand what was going on here. So kudos to you and thank you so much for going through the not inconsiderable amount of work to do something like this. So comments.
Are you looking for people to ask questions or do you want me to present something?
I think the packet's actually pretty good. I mean, certainly you are more than willing to present whatever you'd like. We all have read it, including the letter and the individual proposal. I have some comments, but I'd like to hear what other folks have to say here. Let's start with Mr. Miller.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly, comprehensive. And I guess, I mean, I think I most responded, quite honestly, to this sort of economic and personal element to this. And this is like, I think the big challenge in historic preservation. You have what is, it is on the Macris database and documented there, and to my eyes actually a quite lovely house, a charming, cute little house with a wonderful property. So there's that component of it that we're compelled to think about, but I'm also much moved by the considerable and well-documented economic challenges and the personal ones that go along with that, and trying to accommodate sort of two-family living in the proposal. And so, yeah, I mean, that's all I would say for the moment, that it was, it's a sort of a model in a certain way of a beautiful house that on the one hand you would hope could stay, and on the other hand, a very compelling argument for allowing demolition to go forward, based on the financial hardship of it and the personal family need. After all, houses have to hold people and have to respond to the needs of the people that live into them, and ultimately when they don't any longer, you have to take that very seriously. So that's where I'd yield the floor. I'm sorry, just as an initial thought.
Sounds good. Annie, have you had a chance to take a look at that?
Yeah, I did have a chance to take a look at the packet, and I also took a little drive by the property today. I agree with Kevin. It seems, at least from the exterior, to be a charming house with lots of character. Just from the outside, it's hard to see all the challenges, especially with the foundation. That was well documented in the packet. Obviously that's a very serious economic challenge to overcome when considering rehabilitating and preserving the home. That being said, my personal feeling is that there's a lot of houses in town that could potentially kind of try to claim these same I'm trying to put my thoughts to words here.
Stipulations, I think.
Yeah,
or
the same stipulations of how to get around the demolition delay bylaw and demolish a home. And so I'm kind of torn on our on our responsibility to preserve where appropriate. So I kind of have mixed feelings. I do understand the owner's point of view, and definitely appreciate all the due diligence that went into the very thorough packet presented to us. But I'm not immediately sold on naming this as not preferentially preserved.
Yes, and you get a reward for saying that 3 times quickly.
Sorry.
Whoever came up with that phrase was just like, it was a late on a Friday afternoon. Preferentially preserved. Peacocks in a puppy bag. All right, Rebecca Deans Rowe, what say thee?
I'm feeling a lot like Annie, that it's such a charming house and a style that we don't see a lot of in Southborough. It's sort of unique in that way. Although I do also appreciate the incredible amount of work they went into documenting, how difficult it would be to restore. And I kind of appreciate the idea of keeping the land in the family, if not the house. So I am equally torn, because I do think it's, a very nice historic structure.
Okay. And last but not least, Mr. Blaschke, what do you think?
Mr. Kiley, when did you, I know it's in the packet, when did you acquire the property?
It's part of a trust between myself, my brother and sister, but ever since I've been there in 61, it's been my grandfather's house. He actually owned 30 acres on the street.
Yeah.
There's just 2 houses left. That house and the house next door that my mother lived in. She passed away about a year ago. So that's why we're deciding what to do with the property.
I understand. So clearly the family's had this a long, long time, and well before the advent of the demolition delay bylaw.
Yeah.
That's just a bookmark. I like the others, am torn about the preservation versus the financial impact, but I think when you net it all out, there's nothing I would say that goes beyond the others, except I would lean more towards the financial impact of trying to preserve this, and the degree to which you would to really radically restructure things. I mean, a 5 foot, 5 foot by a half foot basement height, trying to turn it into a current foundation and so on would be a lot of excavation. And as you say, the equity in the house doesn't really cover the costs of all this. So as much as I like the notion and prefer to, obviously it's part of this commission, keep historic homes intact. I also understand that this would be a significant expense for little outcome compared to the cost of new construction. Do you have any planned renderings of what the new building would look like? Are you thinking of making it look like what's there, just divided into 2 families, or what's your thoughts there?
It was, all I have is an overview. It was going to be a duplex of such as 2 ranches with the garages in the middle. That way, I'm going to need in the future 1 level living, and my daughter was going to live on the other side so that she could try to take care of me and whatever. So it would be just two small ranches with a garage, a shared garage in the middle.
All right. So the point is
Prefabricated housing.
Yeah.
The facade would change considerably then based on what it looks like.
Right.
Yeah, it's
All right.
prefab housing.
Right, but it would be like a ranch that's similar to the next house next door. It just would be on the small end facing the street. And I mean, I've lived in the house, and I have actually helped work on the house. When I lived in there and the up to 98 and no 88, and when I was in there, like the kitchen floors and the floors are not even, like my daughter's toys would roll and stuff. So the foundation's been needed to be done. When I first got an estimate in 88, it was 60,000. Now we're over 120,000 just to raise that house. And then when we did move in, part of the basement had no floor, it was dirt. And so the floor that is in there is only a couple inches thick. And we used to have like purple salamanders living in the basement till we started putting dehumidifiers, and the heating runs through the basement through the air. So in order to prevent mold, we have to run a dehumidifier constantly. And then since it's fieldstone foundation and the cement is getting towards way past the end of its life, we patch it, but every fall mice come in. We have to constant battle with them. And then heavy rains like we've had to rain will get in. We have to have a sump constant, run on heavy stuff. So and it is a small little farmhouse with the footprint of a small farmhouse, like no closets, very small kitchen, everything's very small. So if you were to rebuild it, only one of us would be able to stay there. So we're trying to get it so that both of us could live on the property.
Understand. Thank you. Michael, you're muted.
Mr. Kiley, have you obtained a permit to do a duplex on this property? Remember, I had written to you about that?
Yeah, no, I have not yet, because I was going to make sure that this went by, and then I was going to do the site engineering, because I want to make sure it can fit on it, because I'd have to do, the site engineering for the septic and everything.
So those are my 2 questions. The first one has to do, I get the condition of the house, although that is not unusual for old houses. Mm-hmm. I would personally prefer that the permitting be in place for whatever you want to do before we say this house would not be preferentially preserved, or we would err on the side of a financial allowance on this, which, by the way, I would just honestly say is really not our purview. These financial arguments are cogent, but I took a look at the proposal, some of the costs laid out in this thing, and I think there's some way downward here. I'm not going to comment on the raising in the house basement thing, but I would certainly send that quote out, being in construction again. to see what could be done. And there are just things like $3,000 for a front door and, you know, water hookups and things, which would be part and parcel of any building. I just redid a roof on a house that size for $8,000, and the figure here is 24,000. So I mean, I think the cost of reconstruction might be considerably less. However, that's not for us to tell you one way or the other. I'm just saying that working in construction, I think that there's some room to wiggle if you'd ever decide to go down that road. So, I think my feeling would be that we would vote this to be preferentially preserved and have you come back to us with, so the worst case scenario is we hold you up for 9 months and some days. And then you can do whatever you want. The best case scenario is that you would get the permitting and make sure that before this house is torn down, you can actually do what you want to do, as opposed to you not potentially having it renovated or selling it to someone or however else. Again, this is not our job to advise you on that. But it is a fairly unique house in Southborough. It's part of a time period that we don't have many examples of. And as you say, it's also the remaining house from a very large agricultural concern, which is also important to us. So, this would be my vote, is that we would vote tonight to preferentially preserve this property and have you come back to us and say, okay, if they've given us the permit to do what we want to do, we can do the septic, we can build a duplex, which I don't know if that's an approved use for this area. I don't know, frankly. But then we would say, okay, I think, given the financial issues and you're sure that no one else wants to do it, we can give you an early out. I mean, that would be my vote. But I'd like to take one swing at this to see whether that estimate for you is really what you really want to do. And I also want to make sure that you can actually build what you think you want to build on that property before we say, okay, this isn't important to us anymore. Does that seem a reasonable thing to you, Mr. Kiley?
Yeah, I'd also be willing to try to, there's been the option of buying the other one out and where I would build just a single family house, small ranch. Would that be better?
Well, I mean, ideally, we'd like to see this thing renovated. I mean, I understand it's going to be like a total gut, but the porch and I've seen this stuff done. I mean, it's the excavation and all the work. Essentially, they just essentially preserve the frame and you build a new house inside and out. Sometimes it's more expensive. Sometimes it's not. I mean, probably not less expensive than prefab housing, but certainly, to get a house that I think would probably be worth more in the end, an historic home, I don't know. I think those costs may weigh out, but the single family, that part, versus two family, and boy, do I hear you about elder care.
Yeah.
I'm 57 this year, and I'm thinking, wow, this house has a lot of staircases in it. That would be my vote. Is not to hold you up unnecessarily here, but to put a stay on the demolition portion of this until you are sure that you are good to go to build what you want to build. Does that sound reasonable?
So, but does that mean I have to get my septic approved first, or do I go directly for a variance on a duplex?
I don't think we can get into the business of giving you advice on that sort of way. That's outside of our field. But, from our perspective, what we would like to see, to give you an early out on this would be them to sign off and say, hey, we're giving you the yes to build what you want to build, and B, you have the septic clearance and a perk and all that other stuff to do it. That way, what you can do. As I say, we can only hold you for 9 months, but before this house goes, to the wrecking ball, I would love to make sure that you can do what you want to do.
Okay.
I would take an motion to vote.
Oh, there's one other thing. So the big tree that's next to the side, it was something that my grandmother planted. If we're gonna do, so that was like more than 50 years ago. If I were to do the foundation, I think that tree's gonna suffer. Whereas when I was to rebuild, I was gonna save that tree by moving the house backward.
It's possible. I mean, we do a lot of foundation work and stuff without having a lot, there's amazing things that they can do. I love the tree, actually. I love the tree as much as the house. I was noting that along the way. Of course, I'm a landscape, architecture firm guy. So I think there's a way out of that too. But again, that doesn't get, into the duplex biz. So, let's just see what the town says in terms of permitting. And in the meantime, we'll vote to preferentially preserve this, which, just to be clear, is a 9-month hold.
Okay.
While we investigate these opportunities. This does not prevent you in any way from pursuing the rest of the permitting, or to get the variance or whatever else you need to do on that property. Because regardless of what we say, in 9 months and some small amount of days, this thing will revert back to you. All right?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much again for bringing this fantastic presentation to us. I really, really appreciate that level of cooperation. It certainly makes our life easier and makes us much easier for us to say, okay, you've done your diligence and now we can let you go. It makes us feel better that your grandmother's house gets destroyed, which, hopefully we can figure out some way. But we value you, and I'm glad that you're thinking of moving back to Southborough.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
One question, if I may. You mentioned the other home on the original property. Did I hear you say one option might be to rebuild either this or the other one?
No. What's my mother, who was living in the one next door, has passed away about a year ago. My brother, who's living in the red house, is either going to move in there, or my daughter will be. If he decides not to, my daughter could move in there. And then I would have built a smaller house. But right now, his plan is to move into the house next door.
I see. Well, but if he doesn't, then maybe your daughter could move in and you could build something, single family without the variance. I don't know.
Right. I could build something. I mean, we've looked at houses that have the same look. It's just more single floor, because I won't be able to do staircases and stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I mean, there might be potentiality of even rebuilding, since this existing structure would be a gut, there might be a potentiality of rebuilding that essentially as a single floor house with a loft or something that could be, anyway, but that's not our, not our responsibility. So I will entertain a motion to vote to have the property 22, what's the address? 22 Edgewood, thank you. I always want to say Edgemere. 22 Edgewood to be preferentially preserved. Entertaining a motion for that.
I'll motion for 22 Edgewood to be preferentially preserved.
Do I hear second?
Second.
Vote. Annie.
Yes.
Wysong, yes. Miller.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm thinking this over. Is there a way to back this up just like about 2 minutes and talk about this just a bit more, just so I don't have melt into my chair or something? Or go forward if you like, and I'll just.
I don't know if we can actually back this up in a meeting sense.
Yeah, I'm just like trying to.
Our parliamentarian is not here, Kate, who would have told us this issue.
I was just trying to have my head catch up with my mouth. So.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think what I would like to do is complete this vote. You can vote no, and then we can discuss this further when you're done.
I'm just going to abstain on this round.
Okay, abstain.
That's okay.
Miller abstains. Dean's Rowe.
Yes.
Yes. Flashkey.
Abstain.
Okay, 3-2. So the House is voted to be preferentially preserved. And again, Mr. Kiley, just do figure out what you need to do, and we will expedite this for you. We're not going to hold you up unnecessarily.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you want to come back and talk just a little bit about this, Mr. Miller.
Sure, and that's the part of it that I would want to stress, that I do not want to unnecessarily, and I think there's consensus on that, hold up Mr. Kiley at all, because I'm quite, like I think I led with saying, it's a wonderful house and it has some historic significance, and that's our job to think about it. That I would just go back and again say that I found this sort of not only the economic argument, but the family argument side of this very compelling. And I think sort of that ultimately, family trumps a house. But I think I agree completely that this is a reasonable course of action to preferentially preserve it, to ask Mr. Kiley to look into the necessary permits for what he wants to do, and then coming back with them. I think we're all committed to moving with dispatch quickly, in other words, to sort of resolve it so that, he has good clarity. So I agree with everybody here that I think, this is the right way to go. I just, again, my mouth was lagging my brain slightly, or my brain was lagging my mouth. I'm not sure which it was, but fortunate fellow citizen. Is a beautiful property from what I can see, and and hopefully there'll be some options. I would just like to say, like, if there's anything, if maybe the pause and the even if it just amounts to the pause necessary for Mr. Kiley to obtain the necessary zoning variants or permits to build a duplex, gives him some time to sort of fully think through all the options, that would all be to the good. I don't think we'll be holding anything up whatsoever, but so I agree. You want to re-vote?
No. I think I think it's fine. Here's my take on this. It's 9 months is 9 months, right? Our job, as far as I'm able to construe it, and I have been wrong, is to expedite every possible means of preservation before we settle on demolition. And to me, the financial argument weighs most strongly in terms of moving this thing along, as opposed to just holding it out or let it run along the clock, which we could simply do, just let this thing run the clock out. That to me is where the financial part comes in, and the family part comes in, is to say, okay, well, we've exhausted the possibilities for renovation. The estimate is real in terms of costs. No one else wants to do anything with it. Can you let me go now, as opposed to making me wait 9 months? To me, that to me is where that comes in. But as a commission, our charge is to try to keep these structures alive for as long as possible, and pursue every avenue. And what town council has re-informed us is that the onus is on us to make that happen. And so, potentially find, other buyers, or however that would actually go. Hopefully, though, it sounds like there might be some possibility of having Mr. Kiley's daughter live next door, and he, perhaps rebuild something similar. Again, we're not the arbiters of taste, but what strikes me so much about the house that's there now is its scale, its approachability, its porch. I think it's all the type of things that we're trying to write into the downtown district, historical district, and try to maintain those as much as possible. That would be my sole comment on that.
One thing I would, I just wonder about if there's anyone in the participants that I noticed the houses that seem to be across the street and adjacent are much newer homes, much more recent vintage. And so I think that's a factor in the consideration, just to some degree, at least. In other words, if you have a very consistent sort of fabric in a neighborhood, I mean, you don't want to lose the one example of a house that you have, but it's not as if you're, I don't know, to put it, breaking up a set, as it were.
No, I totally get you. I mean, it's a less historically critical area. I mean, I think that's why I would even consider this expediting this in the first place, as opposed to an all-out battle. But it is part of a vernacular of which we don't have many examples left.
Right.
And it was part of a fairly historic farmstead. That whole Edge Hill Road area was a major agricultural production area. So I was out in Lancaster today, which I recommend highly visiting if you ever have a chance. I don't know if you know where it is. It's on the other side of Bolton. You just take 117 out. And I don't know what was going on out there historically, but they have the most incredible slew just right along 117 of historic homes. Really unique things. I'm talking like first period 1690 gable fronts, and just like, whoa, it's just, and these strange, a lot of strange things, and they're interspersed with modern houses and stuff. And I was thinking how well that all worked, in the sense of, some of the modern fabric was intrusive, but by and large, these old folks did pretty well down along the way. So it's worthwhile. There's great orchards out there and farmsteads and things. So if you're ever looking for a little place to go, that whole route up 117, which I think eventually goes to Fitchburg, I could be wrong, is just a pretty place to go take a look. Any other discussion on this before we leave it?
Yeah, I was going to comment. The reason I abstained is that it wasn't clear just how much we were asking him to spend to get to this next decision point. In other words, if the permit or the approval to put in a duplex requires a full septic evaluation and some engineers, sanitary engineering firm to come out and perk and all that, he could be looking at thousands of dollars cost to get to the decision point.
That's not our requirement, remember. I mean, that would have to be done regardless. So if this was indeed the process, those are costs that are incurred. We're not inquiring, just be absolutely clear here, because I don't want this to rebound on us. We're not requiring anything.
No, I agree.
Right?
I agree.
Nothing at all in terms of further work at all. We're just saying that if you would like to get out of jail early card, it is in Monopoly, come back to us with the plans in place to say that you can actually do what you want to do.
I agree. I think that, Jim, I was thinking that too, like, would it put an undue burden on the owners to go through all of that, but then they will have to anyway if they plan to build at the end of 9 months, correct?
Yeah.
So
we'll see. Also, we also have to keep in mind precedent about, choosing properties. I think there's been some issues in the past about letting things go. The incentive is always for people to say this cannot be restored or renovated, right? I mean, the incentive is always there, that it's harder. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, it doesn't matter. But I mean, our goal, I think, is to try to preserve as much of the fabric as possible. So there you have it. Okay, moving on to our next item here, which is the item number 3, worsening conditions in the old burial ground. Okay, so I haven't gone after our tremendous storm of yesterday, which was something to behold. I think we will all agree. I mean, I actually was at the museum at 4 o'clock this morning because I woke up in a terror that the sump pump wasn't going to be on. And so in the middle height of that storm, totally like half asleep, I dragged myself into the car, out through the rain, up to the museum. And the sump pump was in fact chugging away. It was full of water. And fortunately, there were some small leaks in the basement, but nothing terribly serious. Kevin had sent me some pictures of, limbs down and other things in the old burial ground. I don't know exactly what to do about this. The selectmen have said again that they are in control of this. They are in control. They are in control. However, there's no ongoing maintenance of this. I don't know what the way forward is here, because either they are going to take control and do something about this, or they need to appoint someone, not even us, to do something about it, because there is serious issues. Kevin, would you share, not now, but would you just share send it to me, I'll send those pictures out that you sent of these huge limbs that narrowly missed taking out, a whole row of these stones. And the main problem is the tree conditions. The trees are in terrible shape. They haven't been actively maintained in all. A lot of them are coming to the end of their lives. There's been no replanting. And as Karen Galligan reported again to us in March, I believe it was, that there's no ongoing maintenance. They don't enter there except to have a contractor mow the lawn. So when the Cemetery Commission was disbanded back in the 90s, and this was all transferred to the Department of Public Works, unfortunately, what wasn't transferred with it was an active plan for maintaining one of our best historical assets. So I think it might be worthwhile to write to the Board of Selectmen again and just go on record saying, you know, we've heard you. We've heard what you said about who's in control and, you know, who's responsible. But here are, and maybe include these pictures, I mean, here are the issues that we're facing, and that there needs to be some active work there and budget to do it. I mean, you know, that's been the issue too. I mean, there's thousands and tens of thousands of dollars of tree work to be done in that old cemetery. So I don't know.
You know what concerns me, Michael, is that we've spent north of $20,000 already preserving, leveling, and cleaning stones in the old burial ground, and we probably will have to spend more money in the future. And what is the point if the trees are in such terrible shape that they're dropping big limbs and, you know, going to damage the stones afterward? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, especially since those limbs not only damage the stones, I mean, they literally shatter them into multiple pieces.
Right.
That they're
And they
destroyed.
could hurt someone too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there's that. I mean, you know, we call those trade widowmakers.
Yeah.
You know, so take your life in your hand, walking around in there under those trees. You know, I just think that we need to sound the alarm. Kevin, you wanted to say something?
I did. The photos that I took that I had sent, I shared with Michael, and Michael can send to the whole commission. They just happen to be ones that, you know, walking the dog through the old burial ground, and it was before, you know, like the Friday before one of the many hurricanes that we get every weekend. You know, I think it was not this one, but prior to that. And yeah, it was an extremely large limb, came down, and actually did do some damage, from what I could tell, to a couple of headstones, like shearing off bits of slate. You know, they were the really old ones. And these are, by the way, so several of the graves were veteran marked graves. You know, so it's very frustrating to see. And as someone who walks to that cemetery quite frequently, yeah, I can personally attest, is what you guys already know, is that a lot of those trees are in absolutely appalling condition. And so what I personally think about it is that I think, you know, whatever this sort of tug of war that goes on between various boards and commissions over jurisdiction, be damned, you know. Meanwhile, Rome is burning while this goes on. And so if there's some way that we can sort of break through and just say, you know, we just want to do the right thing and get things tidied up and preserved and the graves respected and all that stuff. Can we figure this out? And one suggestion I would make is that, I'm sorry, I can't quote this accurately, although I know there's some interest. I believe it was Mimi Luttrell on the planning board was talking about this at a recent meeting with regard to trees and the concern about how and when they're cut down and all that kind of stuff, which is to say that I know there are folks, and I'm sure in Conservation Commission, and there are other people in town, you know, and on boards that perhaps we can work with that care about this stuff, and including the Board of Selectmen. I'm sure, you know, they don't want a tree to fall on anyone's head or in anybody's gravestone any more than you or I do. There's got to be some way that we can sort of reach consensus with some folks to get the agency to help. You know, that's all I think we're looking to do, right? Help.
Yeah, great. I think you should draft this letter.
Okay. Sure. You know,
I vote that we have Kevin draft this letter. I think, because I think you're right. One of my ideas was to try to grab people from a member of planning, a member of conservation, a member from Board of Selectmen, a member from historical, to try to create a old burial ground committee that would adjudicate things like these flags, which I have not forgotten about, and do not intend to forget about. I just haven't quite decided what I want to do about it yet. But all this verbiage about the bloody flags, and here we are having these huge limbs shatter the gravestones of the veterans. I mean, let's get real here. So let's draft that letter and send it out about some interagency type of activity. And see what we can do to try to bring this up to the public awareness, and maybe an op-ed piece in my Southborough or something, in a non-confrontational voice would be helpful too, to say, this is a serious issue. I mean, this is our primary historical asset in terms of size, shape, scope, age. But anyway, so just wanted to bring that up to everyone's attention. So Kevin, I don't think we need to vote on that. Will you, draft that for us and I'll circulate it? Oh, you're muted, my friend.
sorry. Yeah, sure. I'll try to come up with something and maybe go back and look at that. I'm pretty sure it was a planning board meeting, where they thinking about these issues of trees in town and what can be done, so I'd love to get a group of people from different boards that are concerned about this. And let me tell you, if a limb drops on my head while I'm walking my dog in there, I'm gonna do
Lawsuit.
So even from a liability standpoint,
It's huge. I mean, it's huge.
Oh.
It's huge. I mean, the town has essentially come out and admitted that we don't maintain this, yet it's a public space. I mean,
Yeah.
And we're investing town dollars in it.
yes. We also need to get, I'm told, Annie, did the CPC guy come and do the report? The headstone report? Do you remember that? Graves? I thought that was in.
No, no, there's been no further action or activity related to that for the.
All right, I will bang on Karen Galligan about getting that annual report taken care of about the assessment of the stones, because that needs to happen as well. I also have written to them about the Civil War monument and the tree selection there. Obviously, Karen told me there was a whole point of discussion there about all these crappy little crab apples that got put up there along the way. When this whole thing had come out back 3 terms ago about the downtown, we were promised some weigh-in terms of what the tree cover would be in that area, because you really want large-scale shade trees to replace the huge elms and oaks that were there previously, to give this wonderful shady place to sit around the monument. And now it's just a sun-baked oven. I mean, take your life in your hand to sit there. And the trees that got put in are these dinky-boo little crab apples, like little ornamental crab apples, because I guess somebody wanted to have crab apples there along the way to remind them of the crab apples that were further down the line in front of the old Southborough Arms location. Great, but we had advocated very strongly that these should be historically appropriate trees, and they should be of a scale that would actually do something. So how this all came about, I don't know, but we weren't consulted. The stuff was planted. There's some trees next to the museum that are spare that were just stuck in, that hopefully can get resettled back in the location. But it's not a thing of a minute to think about tree cover, because you have to understand how the varieties grow, how tall things are eventually going to get, what the scale is. If you put a tiny little tree in a huge space, does it look like a little piece of tinsel, Tinseltown kind of thing? So there's thought behind this process, especially when you are in an historic environment where you're replacing huge old trees that are at the end of their lives. So, I mean, there should be a comprehensive plan for the old burial ground that says, that identifies all the trees in it, what their condition are, the condition of each one is, what the varieties are, where it is on its projected lifespan, where it is on a climatological assessment, because a lot of these trees that were planted historically are now not predicted to do well, like sugar maples, where it's getting too warm for them. And so, what are adequate replacements? And, it's not necessarily just native, because, I know that's an ecologically sound thing to say, but it's not necessarily the best from an historical perspective or best from a results perspective in terms of choosing varieties that are going to withstand city conditions, whatever, we throw at them. So in any event, I would argue for a professional assessment of that space to see what's what. And there are companies that do this. I know one, this is beyond my ken. I know one that does it, and I know it's not going to be cheap. And that's just the starting point, is the assessment, to say, what's what. So anyway, I'd like to sound the alarm.
I was in the rural cemetery a couple of days ago because, Ben Haley of the State Historical Commission, subsequent to our last meeting, had contacted, reached out asking for some photos that they needed for the application for the National Register thing for the from the rural cemetery. The photos he had weren't adequate. So I went over there and I took several photos and sent them to him earlier this week. And, over there, I was having the same thought. Maybe a study needs to be, you could do a combined, the town cemetery sort of tree study, because my wife and I were having the same conversation about trees in the rural cemetery, that you have to think 50 to 75 years ahead.
Well, they do a better job there, though. I mean, they actually maintain that, and they do replace the trees, because I've been watching. I don't know what varieties, who's controlling the varieties of what's chosen, but there is a continual replacement mechanism going on there because they actively maintain it.
Right. There are efforts there. Whether or not that could even be better is another story, but. It's the same issue, but this idea that you have to think very far ahead if you want to have, if you want a 3 or 4 generations from now to be enjoying what we've got now, you got to act.
Well, to quote Cicero, he who plants trees plants for future generations. So, all right, so you'll draft that and we'll get that out to the Board of Selectmen. Hopefully they'll actually answer us. Okay, any other business? Item number 4 that may legally come before the commission. Does anyone have anything they need to report or say or do? I have a quick note that we were contacted by Kevin, a friend with a cultural. Do you remember?
Ben Haley. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Facing. Let me get to that. Oh,
there's a proposal. There's, I guess, funds available to create cultural districts. And the lady at the Arts Council, I believe.
Southborough Cultural Arts Council, Mary Picars. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her name.
Whom I met. She's lovely. And interestingly, she wrote in this letter. She said, maybe we could get together and do this amphitheater idea. Of like a seating area with a small performance space next to the museum. And I said, that's my idea. Because I've been advocating this, because the land is actually naturally in the shape of a bowl, right? So you could see something along the lines of just stone half circles sort of built into an amphitheater-like place with some small stage set down at the base of the hill towards St. Mark's.
That would be cool.
Yeah. And I think of this in sort of a really minimalistic sort of way, so that you would have, not fully configured half circles, so that, maybe you would have one like this and another piece like this and another one behind it, middle length. Does this make any sense to what I'm saying? Sort of an abstract amphitheater that would kind of sit in a New England sort of way into that space. anyway, I just, because it naturally bowls from the museum down the hillside, and it would require minor excavation and minor work actually to do something like that. It would just require the budget to buy and cut the stone pieces, which would be, and then people could bring their own cushions and sit and listen to music and school productions and, you know, all this stuff. How I will say that, you know, and I'm going to, nice little pat on the back here. The trees that have been planted on the periphery deliberately to allow that. So everything that has gone in there that we've done has gone in with an eye to being able to leave the center space open to potentially, you know, do something like that. So she thought of this. Now I'm going to tell her, when I talk to her again, I'm going to say, are you sure you don't remember when I talked to you the last time about this? But if it was indeed a case of two minds thinking alike, I think it's a great idea. And I've been talking about trying to get this cultural corridor going from the very beginning. And it would be lovely to do something with some good PR value for the Historical Commission. Wouldn't that be nice? You know, and especially if they ever get this downtown district thing going, you know, to tie in a rejuvenated downtown. But you have some nice resources there. You have the community house, you have the library, you have Pilgrim Church, you have the museum, and something that would allow a gathering space. I think it could be used quite substantially. I mean, I could see outdoor plays, I could see lectures, I could see concerts, you know, for the school kids, I could see all sorts of things. But so supposedly there's some funding available, but Kevin, you're gonna talk to her and find out a little more about that. Maybe she'll come back and talk to us.
I am, and I would have done this had my classes not started up this week. So I've been busy teaching and
Yeah, no worries, please. It's
getting
like,
ready to bail last night, which didn't come true. So
yeah, and I'm sorry, by the way, having this moved around. I had a miscommunication with the clerk's office about the wording that they required, so it didn't get posted correctly. And boy, I'll tell you, there's no mercy there. If it's not posted correctly, it's just like, I said, couldn't you just alter and put the word in you want? It's like, and Jim Haggerty wrote to me back and said, Michael, altering any agenda for any purpose would be a fool's errand at best. So I thought, okay, Jim, you know, that's the way it goes. We'll just move to another day. Anyway, I love our clerk, and we love them all. All right, so that's all I have. Our next meeting, which I believe is the 18th.
I have the 16th.
16th. I am going to ask permission, invite the town council, and we'll begin our discussions of the rules and regulations. That will be the only item on the agenda unless something else comes up, because I'm sure it'll be long. We may have to move depending on the availability of town council, so I will pursue that tomorrow and get back to you so that we can, you know, get that going.
Michael, question, is the discussion based on recommendations we've made to town council? Is he giving us feedback on that? Kind of where are we in this whole cycle?
Well, we're nowhere because we haven't submitted the documents to anybody yet. So I'm going to request permission to speak. I'm going to attach the documents to them and say, we'd like you to begin. We'd like to use these discussions as an opening, you know, point of discussion for our changes to demolition bylaw and rules and regulations for the Historical Commission, and invite him to come and talk to us and let him tell us whatever he thinks. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm concerned, at least I'm personally done talking on this issue, in the sense of, you know, this is now laid out. And so now it's to say, okay, this is good, this is bad, this is changed, this is no, you need this, you need that, you know, blah, blah, blah. So there's at least the foundation to build the house on. And I think we've done what we can do. So let's.
Well,
town council.
I brought it up because I think at least Kevin and I wanted to request a copy of the markups to take a review pass, just to understand the scope of the changes.
I actually have to do those. I have to either figure out how to use the compare document feature or manually do that. I'll look and see if I have that readily available. I think I can just bring the two documents together and just say compare documents. I think
Yeah, or just send the original on that and we can look at them, you know.
That's long. If the computer can do it, I'll try to do it for you.
All right, but if not, you have to just
It's a miserable process otherwise.
Yeah, I apologize for missing the last meeting, but I also am interested to see what those specific changes are. And, just my opinion is I think it merits having, some conversation as a commission on specifically what those changes are, either concurrent to or in advance of discussing the changes with town council.
I'd like to try to do those things simultaneously.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't think we don't know the questions and we don't know the answers.
Yep.
And I don't ever want to hear from anyone ever again that we've done something wrong. And so let's just take this as a point of departure and see what he says. And you can judge the validity or non-validity of what we've proposed. And then you can take the document, and then once he's said yay or nay to these things, can then discuss the individual points about what we want to support or not. But I'd like to make sure this time that everything that we're discussing is already pre-approved. In terms of the pure legality. Whether we want to include it eventually or change it, that's fine. But just the legality of the documentation.
Sounds great.
Because I don't want to go through that again. It took a few years off my public service career, which may be a good thing to some people. Anyway, so anyone else have anything they would like to add or discuss? Again, we want to welcome Annie back and say how thrilled we are that she is a new addition to our family. And
thank you.
Hope and happiness for a wonderful and successful new person in the household there off on Oak Hill Road.
Thank you.
So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, Annie.
Yes.
Wyson, aye. Kevin Miller.
Yes.
Becca Deans Rowe. Yes, she says.
Yes.
Yes, she says. Jim Blaschke.
Yes.
Very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We are adjourned, and I will be in touch about the 16th and what's on the docket. And then also we want to try to schedule the cultural thing also too, but we'll do that for a different day, I think, right? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Bye, everybody.
Good to see you all.
Good night.
Goodbye. Thank you for coming, and happy Labor Day.
Yeah.